to The Actor and the Engineer. I have no idea what I'm doing, but my name is Paul James, and I am the actor.
Oh, my name is Josh Knapp, and I'm the broadcast engineer. You do know what you're doing because you just got cast in a play.
Yes, I did.
So we got to talk about that right off the top.
Well, yeah, thank you for bringing it up.
Congratulations.
Yes,
That's
I try to
awesome.
stress actor just a little bit harder than I normally do. But yes, I've actually been auditioning quite a bit and haven't heard back from this big theater project that they were casting their whole season. So you get a little, not like introspective about not getting something. It's just I had to do two different pieces and they were like 90 seconds long, which is bizarre. And then you get to the audition, you hear everybody else, and I'm like, that's not 90 seconds. But they tell me 90 seconds. I believe 90 seconds. So I think I just went over a minute for each piece. And they were supposed to be contrasting. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Contrasting monologues. And both of the pieces border on stereotypical characters or caricatures, which during an audition sometimes can be beneficial because you can be over the top and then the director can be like, okay, I can kind of see truth in that. Let me bring it back down. But I was a little worried about the one character being stereotypical, and I have not heard back from any of those people. That said, it just makes you a little worried, like, oh, I hope I didn't offend anybody. I hope that it was believable. I'm not sure. Anyway, the long and the short of that is that another notification came up. A friend of mine Facebooked me and said, hey, what about this? And I said, okay, cool. And so I went to the second night of the audition, which is unusual for me. I usually go to the first, get in, get out. And the director, who's super sweet, super nice, she says, can you come back by 7:30? And I said, yes. And I didn't realize what she had done is she auditioned people Monday night and then brought them back for callbacks on Tuesday night at 7:30. So she was bringing me back for a callback, but I didn't really put that in my mind. And I was there for 4.5 hours. That is the longest callback I've been through. I think it might be the longest period. But anyway.
Wait, hold on. You were there at 7:30 and you didn't go on until 4.5 hours later?
No.
Okay.
There at 6, like 5:30, 5:45, and didn't leave the building until 10:15.
Wow. Okay.
So 4.5 hours, give or take.
You're there.
And the interesting thing about that, the reason why I'm telling you about that is because halfway through the audition process, I was like, okay, I have no idea what's happening here. That was fun. That was fun. That was good. Oh, I don't really like what I did there. Oh, that's good. That guy's good. That's interesting. She's cool. All the people were really nice. And then all of a sudden I started having fun. And that's really unusual for me. I mean, that's really unusual. I guess I just got to like, okay, screw it attitude. Like I'm just going to go in there and what I didn't know is, although I had already read the play, I didn't know that it was as broad of a comedy as it turns out that it's going to be. So my antics and my over-the-topness actually worked to my advantage. And the other crazy thing is that I got home from that audition, and by the time I got home, I sat down on the couch, I was getting ready to watch something, and I noticed I had an email. Well, I always get emails at night, and they're always trash or whatever, and spam. And it was the director offering me the part. Less than 20 minutes. Yeah, that was crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, that was cool.
Quick.
Yeah, it was very quick.
That means you made an impression. Like it was a decisive act for her to send you that quickly.
It's hard to look at it any other way, to be honest with you. As humbly as I can say that, it's hard to look at it any other way. And then another friend of mine said, oh, she wanted to lock you down. She wanted to make sure you were going to do this part. And so it's a play called Meteor Shower, written by Steve Martin. Yes, the Steve Martin. And that's actually was the quote in the advertisement for the audition. Yes, the Steve Martin. And it's a 4-person play, and it's very strange. Another one act, about an hour and 15, hour and 20 minutes. I'm like the one act king, and which I'm fine with. Get in, get out. And it's nothing I've ever seen or read before. And it's theater of the absurd, but it's based in reality. And everybody's super nice. We had our first table read at the beginning of the week, and we had our second rehearsal last night, and we talked about the script, and we're just having fun. And so it's nice to have fun and enjoy the process. I still get nervous. I still get in there, and I still might do my neurotic stuff, but overall, yeah, I'm doing another play.
Wow. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
And I mean, the last play you did was essentially like a 3-hander. This is a 4-hander. I mean, like you are on stage the whole time probably, or a very, yeah.
Opening line, closing line.
There you go. I mean,
actually technically second opening line, but like it's me immediately.
That's great.
And the really cool thing is the guy is having kind of a moment at the beginning of the play. Help me, he says to his wife. And I love it because no matter how nervous I am, I can take it out on that. I can, it's like, I need, he's very neurotic in the beginning of the play. And I was like, okay, I can do that. I think I could do that. I'll be good. So
you shake out the nerves. That's awesome.
I'm so happy about that. Cause if it started on some kind of down level or some kind of serious note, I'd be like, but it's a lot of dialogue. It's a lot of, dialogue between characters, so that's sort of new for me, although the last play was a lot of dialogue between two people or 3 people, but this is like serious back and forth, and it's like a great tennis match, and the other people are great, and it was fun to see the people you thought were going to get cast and who was reading and who you thought was going to end up in, and it's fun to think, well, yeah, that is who I thought would get cast. And so, yeah, I'm excited. I'm as excited as I am anxious, and I'm having as much fun as I am nervous. So do you
feel like over time, especially since you've started getting back into this more recently, like, do you feel like you're a little bit more comfortable with not only the process of like, going through the auditions and stuff, but also like, once you're in it, like you're like, I know what this feels like. Do you feel like more comfortable with that? Is that allowing you to be a little bit freer, or do you still have all those same nerves that?
What do you think I'm gonna say?
I would like for you to say that you feel a little bit freer, but I think
do.
Good.
I do. Okay. I always have the same stuff, this is going to be fun. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I can't remember. How do I remember lines? Forget it. I can't. What
do I do with my hands?
What? Hi, how are you? Thank you. Because I've often talked about the little lines are the hardest because you say, hey, how are you doing every day to people? And it still sounds fake when you're trying to just like say it like right here. So you have to find some form of, luckily I have been given a craft and I can fall back on that. And I believe in that. Sometimes I think, it just happens naturally and organically and you just do what you can do and you don't mess with that if it's feeling exactly right. And the director, she's so nice and so kind and she laughs at everything, and she was laughing at me immediately. And then during the first table read, which I'm not a big table read person. I don't really like that process. I don't really like reading out loud. Figure it out. But it was exploratory and organic and natural, and whatever the flubs were, we were kind of improvising things in between and saying things about the script as we were reading it for the first time, which is unusual. I've never done that before. I've never been in that process. So the answer to your question is yes, I feel more comfortable, but I'm not going to rely on that because that will come back to bite me in the behind if I rely on that. So yes, and we'll see.
All right. Well, we're going to finish the second half of our. I kind of don't want to say it, the Barbenheimer thing.
No, don't then. No.
But but I wanted to start off this Oppenheimer episode going back to Barbie and just pointing out the fact that this is a $1.2 billion movie now. I mean, it is huge. It's huge internationally. It's huge domestically. Like, you can't discount the impact that movie has had. For whatever you think about it, it's had an impact, which that's what art does. That's what good art does. So I think that's, a lot of that has to do with Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie. And, most of it has to do with Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie. But it just needs to be said again. It's an impactful movie, and people, and it's caused a lot of discussions, some of them more navel gazier than others, but it's definitely worth mentioning. So, yeah. Have you had interactions with people about Barbie since our last podcast?
Did I tell you what happened to me when I was walking out of Barbie?
No.
And I was kind of floating because I enjoyed it so much. And I was in that situation where the person getting out of the car was getting out of the car right next to my car. So I kind of had to wait for her, this woman. And I guess she assumed I was coming from the movies because I was in the movie theater parking lot. And she goes, "So what movie did you see?" And I said, "Barbie." And she goes, "Really?" And I was like, "Yeah, it was great." And she was like, "I don't understand how that guy, that like actor guy, that really good looking guy could be in a film like this. Like he doesn't have better material." And I was like, "What?" Like I couldn't comprehend why somebody was engaging in a conversation with me about something that, one, she didn't see the film. I picked up on that very quickly. And two, why are you asking a complete stranger their opinion and not and just accepting it for what it is? Because why? Now I engage people all the time. I talk to people all the time. And so, I mean, be careful what you wish for, because and then I quickly went, "Ryan Gosling? Yeah, he's so good looking." She mentioned that like 3 times, by the way. Mm-hmm. And why is he making this blah, blah, blah? I mean, she said everything but certain keywords, like woke and certain things like that. Mm-hmm. And I very quickly just realized I was just going to be polite and have decorum and just be like, and I was like, "Well, he's fantastic in it. He's probably going to get an Oscar nomination. Have a good day." Like, gotta go. And I was just surprised that people have such an opinion about something that they've not seen or want to engage with somebody. And then when somebody doesn't have the same thoughts and feelings as you do, then you just go, "Okay, have a good day," and accept it for what it is. But yet she wanted me to bag on Ryan Gosling, and I was floating high on him at that point. So there was no way I was going to say anything bad, certainly not to appease her thoughts of what it was. And I don't know this woman. She could be the nicest person in the world. I just thought it was very interesting. So yes, from that point on, I've had major discussions with people. Most people that I know that have seen it get it, love it, and understand why it's so huge. Most people I know or I've come in contact with have gone and seen it either because their girlfriend wanted to see it or because their daughter wanted to see it. Whatever the reason is, they've gone and they've come out of it, and it's thought-provoking, and it's initiated conversations. And I would say, and I don't know what the percentage is, I would say 95% of the conversation is Barbie was this, Barbie was that, Ken was great, she was great, Margot Robbie's, she's great, she's perfect in this, she's that scene with the elderly lady at the bus stop, so funny, she's great, she's touching. America Ferrara, that speech, blah, 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 blah. Some feel good, some feel not so good, some don't understand. And immediately they go, "Have you seen Oppenheimer?" At the end of the immediately. And
because that's also a cultural thing. I mean, the fact that they both came out on the same weekend, which was ultimately a really, really good idea. The fact that Barbie's, PG-13 and Oppenheimer's are, the fact that they're kind of like, you would say ostensibly they're going for different audiences, but there's enough commonality that it wasn't necessarily the people that I talked to who were saying, "I'm going to see Barbie," or "I'm going to see Oppenheimer." They're saying, "I'm going to see Barbie this weekend and Oppenheimer next weekend," or "I'm going to see Barbie on Saturday and Oppenheimer on Sunday," or that it was more of an and than an or. And I think that's what the box office really needs, especially at this point in time, and theaters really need at this point in time. So yeah, I mean, you've got with Oppenheimer, you've got a very skilled craftsman in Christopher Nolan doing what he does best, which is spend a lot of money on a very specific thing and not, making any kind of concessions, down to the point of, like, even in the technology side, he wanted to shoot half of the movie in black and white, and he wanted to shoot it on IMAX film, but there never was any black and white IMAX film. There's never been any 15 perforations, 70 millimeter film out there. And so, like, and I've got 2 examples, this is 35 millimeter film, and it's, a standard, what you would think of as standard film, but this is 15 perf IMAX film. It's huge, and the image is sideways instead of vertical. So, I mean, they just had always made color IMAX film instead of, they never had black and white film. So he went to Kodak, and they made special black and white IMAX film for this movie. Now they'll probably use it for other movies, but that's the kind of stuff that Christopher Nolan does. Not only does he, say, I want to do it this way, he doesn't relent when it comes to those things. So, more power to him, because you could say he has the ability to change the industry, or to change multiple industries. And I think with this movie, he tried to do that while also trying to make an engaging story, essentially just about that ostensibly is about a single event, which is, the testing of the generation and the testing of the first atomic bomb. So how did you like it? I mean, did you feel like it was too slow, too fast? Like, for me, the first time I watched it, it was breakneck speed, because so much information was coming at me, and the way that it was edited, it just felt relentless to me. So it felt, in a lot of ways, it felt overwhelming to me. How did you feel as far as the pace was concerned?
It didn't seem slow, or the pace was fine. It is a bit overwhelming in the beginning of it. It's almost more an art house film in the beginning, and all that imagery and all that kind of like fire and strange soundtrack sounds that are going on. It is a bit overpowering. It is a bit large in the IMAX theater. It's a bit.
Did you see it in IMAX?
I did.
Oh my gosh. See, they weren't playing it here.
Yeah.
You know what they were playing?
It's
Mission
huge.
Impossible.
Of course they were.
Well, they were playing Mission Impossible because it was at the Marbles IMAX, and because this is the first Christopher Nolan movie that's rated R since Insomnia, they couldn't play it at the Marbles IMAX because that is a children's museum.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
So it's, once I found that, I was like, okay, fine. But the closest real IMAX to me is Atlanta. So
wow. It's overpowering. There's a lot of great things going on in this movie. There's, not to change the subject, but of course I go right immediately to the acting. It's superb. Florence Pugh, please.
I didn't know she was in it.
I didn't know she was in it either.
I didn't watch the trailer, so
yeah.
I had
if
no
I did,
idea.
I don't remember her.
Well, maybe she wasn't in the trailer. I don't know. Maybe I have seen
there's
it.
so
I saw,
many
a
other
teaser
people to
trailer,
choose from. It's like
You're
there's
right.
everybody's in this film. And it's a lot of information to take in, and there's a lot of little vignettes, and I thought this movie I'm trying to think, did I have a desire to see it again? And I'm not sure that is exactly my immediate reaction afterwards. And I want to see it again for lots of different reasons. But it's a spectacle, and it is mesmerizing. And the cinematography is amazing. The black and white stuff is amazing. Some of the shots of just the men when the nuclear explosion goes off the first time, just how he shoots them and the colors on their faces and what he had to do to get all that. It's amazing to me. And there's a lot of questions that I have about this film in the end, though. A lot of things that I'm not sure are negative reactions to it or positive reactions to it. I just have some questions. So as for your original question, no, the pacing is fine. I did not feel that it lacked a movement, a forward-telling storytelling process, even though, go back in time and you go front, that kind of stuff. It does take a split second to figure out what's going on in the first black and white interaction and the room with the guys who are talking to him, the committee that's talking to him.
Yeah.
It takes a little while to figure out exactly.
They don't set it up at all. He's just there, and he's old, and you're like, okay.
Right. And why are they talking? Okay. But you just assume that somebody who had anything to do with this process, probably later on, with as controversial as nuclear power is, or nuclear weapons are, they're going to have some kind of committee meeting or some kind of Senate chairperson is going to say, well, and then they're going to, how it connects later on is some of the questions that I have. But no, the pacing it keeps you engaged. It keeps you watching it. And I thought to myself, look at all of these people in this movie. This is not your traditional Saturday night movie. And they're all here. And it was fairly packed. And I think I saw it was maybe a Tuesday. and it was like 1:00 in the afternoon. Now school was still out, and it was still summertime, and school's going back now. But yeah, so I was encouraged that this is a prime example of what everybody has been saying, but the opposite. Everybody's saying movies are dead, blah, 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 blah. If you had told the Oppenheimer people, however long they started pre-production, that this was going to be one of the biggest movies of the summer, I'm not sure they would have believed that. I'm not sure they would have thought it would have had as much impact. And the fact that the only reason why I find the Barbie Oppenheimer conversation interesting is because they're so polar opposite in their directions, but they are similar in they speak the truth for their film. They are teaching you something about yourself via what the characters are going through, and they're well written, and well acted. So it doesn't surprise me that they're having the same effect on people, because that's what people want. People want it. That's what I want. I want truth, and I want believability, and I want a story that engages me, even if it takes an encyclopedia of information to make it happen. And this is an encyclopedia of information of film. But I will end that with, I do have questions.
Yeah, I think that one thing that helped me through it is having strong characters, and Robert Oppenheimer being the main strong character, but Strauss, who is played by Robert Downey Jr., is a strong character, and Matt Damon's character, the general, is a strong character too. And that's what I noticed, is that there were certain scenes that were, good, solid scenes, but then the scenes that really leapt off the screen were the scenes between Cillian Murphy and Matt Damon. And then, pretty much like, the scenes that Robert Downey Jr. was on screen, because he has a lot of exposition to handle, and it's done in a way that, I mean, obviously you have the black and white scenes. He's mostly in black and white scenes. I think he's in a couple of color scenes, but he's mostly in black and white scenes, and those scenes are more further along in the story of Oppenheimer's life. And so there's a lot of that, the difficulty of trying to put information on the screen without making it seem just overtly, textbook like. So because what Cillian Murphy has the ability to do is play off of different people, whether he's playing off of Josh Hartnett, who is having some sort of a renaissance. I guess I just saw him in a Black Mirror episode.
I saw that too.
Yeah, it's good. He's good in both. He's really good in both.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great Black Mirror episode.
Wow,
that's a clever idea.
Oh yeah, him and Aaron Paul are just
knocking it out.
Yep. So
Kate. Mara, right?
Yes,
she's great.
Who I haven't seen really since House of Cards.
Watch what happens now that you just said that. You haven't seen her since House of Cards?
I mean, I don't know what else she's been in since House of Cards.
She was in the first season of Pose. She's been working.
Oh, okay, good.
And she's going to end up, now that you just said that, she's been working so much, and now everything's going to come back to back, and we're going to be like, she's working a lot.
Yeah.
Watch.
Do you know that her and Rooney Mara's dad owns the Giants football team?
Wait, they own two football teams, my understanding.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the Giants and, don't get me with football. I can't remember. I just saw an interview, and one of the family, her father's family is from the Giants side, and her mother's family is from whatever the other team is.
Holy cow. Okay. All right. Well, anyway,
don't ask me about football.
They're still working though. So that's good. That means they really love it, I guess, because obviously they wouldn't need to. But yeah, so those are the kind of the main characters that helped to propel the movie for me. And then also, like you said, the score too. It's Ludwig Göransson, who we've talked about in the past, Black Panther, all kinds of different movies that he's scored. I think this is I think he did Tenet too. So this is the second movie that he's done with Christopher Nolan. So, and that's the other thing that I wanted to bring up, is the fact that Christopher Nolan has this like orbit of people around him, whether it's Ludwig Göransson and also Hans Zimmer for music, cinematographer Hoyt van Hoytema has done the last few movies and is really well versed in IMAX film, so that right there is a big deal. And then just his his producing team, obviously, and all the way down the line, but also the actors. The fact that he works with the same actors. Cillian Murphy's worked with I think Cillian Murphy was in all of the Batman movies, wasn't he?
Yes.
I think he was, yeah. And
Yes.
then Michael Caine, obviously. Cillian Murphy was in Inception, so was Michael Caine. So, and then even that Chevalier character in this movie, he was one of the guys at the beginning of Tenet who was being kidnapped or whatever. So it's just like,
yeah.
And then Matt Damon, of course, who I actually was able to see Interstellar in the theater recently because Alamo Drafthouse they pretty much released all of Christopher Nolan's movies in the theater. All the Christopher Nolan's movies from I think they even did Memento. So like from Memento on, I don't think they did the following, but yeah. So I was able to get a ticket to Interstellar, which is a lot. I mean, talk about being overwhelmed by images and the score. I mean, that's one of those movies, but Matt Damon's in that. So I think I did see a story somewhere that said that Matt Damon said to his wife, like, I'm done with acting for a little while.
No, she was like, we need to negotiate what's happening because you need to like chill out. And he said, sorry to take your story, but he said, yeah, that's fine, hon. I can take a break. But if Christopher Nolan calls, and then Christopher Nolan called.
What is that? His hall pass? That's essentially his hall pass.
Right. Yeah. I think he even describes it like that.
And he had a much bigger part in this movie than he did in Interstellar. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting story. But so my big question was, do you think that Christopher Nolan goes back to these people because they're like known quantities or because they're exactly the right person for the role? I mean, you could make that argument for Cillian Murphy from a visual standpoint, and then his ability to carry a movie this huge and this long and this arduous. I'm sure that Nolan kind of knew that Cillian Murphy could handle it, but why do you think that not only Christopher Nolan but other directors kind of like still gravitate towards these particular actors?
We've actually talked about this in the past, and I don't really know a definitive answer to that. All I know is that there's a language that develops, an unspoken language that develops when you're working with somebody. You just know what they're going to say before they say it, and they know what you're going to say before you say it. And it just seems to be, once that communication is established, that you can rely on that person either being the actor with the director or the director with the actor or whoever it may be. Same with cinematographers. It's think of your job or anybody else's job that's not. It's sometimes we don't think of these as jobs, but in the long run, even Jennifer Lawrence went, it's just a job. I mean, it's not just a job, but it is to her just a job. And not just a job, but I understand what she was saying. And so you just develop a language and you trust the person. And I'm sure when it comes to actors, I don't know because I've never been a director, but I'm sure that they know if they can't get what they want immediately, they know a language that they can go to the actor and say, hey, this is what I need. This is what you're doing. I need somewhere in between, or I need for you to do this, or what you're doing is good. And I think that when it comes to somebody like Cillian Murphy, who is superb, he probably does things on the first or second rehearsal or takes or whatever they're doing. I'm not sure how much rehearsal they did on this film. I'm not sure how much rehearsal most people do on films. Some do some do a lot, some don't do any. I'm sure he's coming out with that we saw on take one. And if it needs any kind of direction, then they have a language already. They've already developed a way of communicating that only they can do. And there's also, it has something to do with a feeling. You have a feeling when you're working with somebody. I've been lucky in my small little orbit that I've worked with people that I've always liked. And there's been one or two here and there that I'm like, not necessarily directors, not necessarily actors, but I've never really worked with a director that I went, oh yeah, never again. I've always worked with directors who I'm like, oh, I hope he likes me again, or I hope she wants me again. Like that's the thought in my head. And then when you see that person's name on the audition notice, you're like, oh, yes. Not, yes, they're going to cast me because I've been in their show before. Yes, when I walk in the room, somebody is on my side. Which you'll hear casting directors talk about how that when you walk into the room, just know they want you to be good. They want you to have the part. They don't want you to be bad. They don't want you to fall on your face. They don't want you to be nervous. They want you to be able to be what they need for you to be. And that does not come across 95% of the time because you're so nervous or whatever. You're thinking they're judging me. Am I doing a good job? Whatever. They could make or break my next paycheck, whatever it may be. But when you see a director's name that you've worked with, you're like, okay, at least that experience we had before was a great experience. And now let's see if we can do it again. And then also you don't want to let that person down. If the experience you had with the director originally was really great and it turned out good and people liked the show or whatever you were doing, then you want that again. And you want the director to know you want that again. And you don't have to explain any of that to somebody that you already know that you've worked with. So with the quality of actors that he works with, why would you not stick with the same? Why would you not call up Matt Damon and say, okay, I'm going to call your wife because I need you? You know, why would you, other than being like a horrible person on set or being a diva or being an a-hole or whatever it may be, as a personality, that would be the only reason I would suspect a director would not want to work with a talented person again because they're difficult or whatever. And sometimes directors are really good at going, that's just them. That's just him. That's just her. That's give them what they want and they'll go away. So I think it's a multiple answered question. So.
Well, and that makes sense. I mean, but the good thing is that this movie allows for him to bring back people who he's comfortable working with and people in, large parts in the movie that he's comfortable working with. But he's also able to bring in people that he hasn't worked with before, but that I can imagine he's very interested in. One of those examples is the Teller character played by Benny Safdie. And so, I mean, this is a fellow director, a fellow writer.
He can do it.
Yeah, and obviously he was used to good effect in Paul Thomas Anderson's Licorice Pizza. So, I mean, it's not like Christopher Nolan is questioning whether this guy can act. I mean, and he was also great in Good Time too, one of the Safdie brothers' first movies. So, but I thought when I saw him, I was like, oh, that happened to me multiple times where you're just kind of people crop up, not only Florence Pugh, but also other actors, Jack Quaid, Macon Blair.
It's always good to see him.
Macon Blair.
And he's significant. He has a significant part.
Yeah, and did you know his next movie is The Toxic Avenger with Peter Dinklage playing the Toxic Avenger?
It's like an A-lister version of the
B trauma movie. Yes,
it took a little while to get that together, didn't it? Like been a while. That's been a thing for a while now.
Yeah, well, it was like mid '80s or whatever when Toxic Avenger came out. So yeah, it's been a while, but I'm sure that Macon Blair's take and Peter Dinklage's take on it is going to be interesting and more than worth a watch. But yeah, I mean, we talked about that was it seemed like it's one of the first in the first couple of years of our podcast when we talked about Blue Ruin. And yeah, I mean I
still think about that movie.
I still think
when I saw him, I went, don't think about Blue Ruin. Don't watch the movie. And I had to focus because I was like, oh, Macon Blair, I like him.
Yeah, I just rewatched Green Room recently, and he's great in that too. He has one of the hardest parts in that movie because he's got to have both sides. He's a bad guy, but you have to root for him at some point, and he has to make you root for him at some point, and that's so difficult to do. So yeah, that's yeah, Megan Blair.
How,
Awesome.
you could spend
Jason
3
Clarke too.
Yeah, so good. I like him a lot. I like him a lot. I feel secure when he's on the screen. I feel like I'm going to understand everything I'm supposed to understand when these actors are on the screen. But you could spend a lifetime about talking about the casting of this movie because, we could talk about Alex Wolff is in it, but does he say anything? Yeah. I don't think he says a word.
He says like 2 lines. He's
does?
Like, I'll go he's like, it's when the fission happens, they find out there was and then he's like, look what happened. I'll go figure it out. And he goes into he's one of the physics students underneath Josh Hartnett. Yep.
Well, the saying is there's no small part, there's only small actors, but that's a bit ridiculous. I mean,
that is.
It's like, but at the same time, wouldn't you do it if you were an actor? I just think about all those people who like make a living off of 1 or 2 lines or make a living off of being a very, very minimal side character in a movie. Like they do a day's work and then they're done. And if you got Alex Wolff doing a day's work of 1 line, 2 lines, it's like, I'm like, come on now.
Well, that's just like, that's what I thought about with Academy Award winner Rami Malek when I saw him in 2 scenes and all he did was hand somebody a pen. And but
then I knew that was happening. I was like, there's no way that's all he's doing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because the film is engaging and it keeps you wondering and trying to figure it out. It's a big puzzle. It's a huge puzzle and you're trying to put the pieces together. And that said, it's not the greatest thing that a film is the length that this is. And we are thinking, when is Rami Malek coming back? That's probably something that should have been thought about afterwards and put together in your mind afterwards. So there is sort of this thing that, I was like, did Alex Wolff just not say anything? And I was like, good for him. I was like, that was incredible to me. I don't really, I haven't seen it twice, so maybe it just didn't stick out enough. But it doesn't bode well for the storytelling process that your mind escapes to something else, even for a split second. That to me is part of some of the questions I have later on that we can talk about.
Well, I mean, yes, we do need to talk about. We just have to say the word Casey Affleck, but we don't have to say anything else. But that was another surprise for me. Like, it's just like, why is he in this movie? He didn't need to be in the movie. He was good, but he didn't need to be in the movie. But I mean,
as a character or him?
Oh, no. I mean, he was fine. There was nothing. Yeah, I didn't feel like that character need. I mean, is the character supposed to feel menacing? But the only reason he's menacing is because of the voiceover being described, how he is being described by another character. But so really, there's nothing in his performance that was, that rose it to that level to me. But I mean, he was good. But I do think we need to talk about the female characters in the movie, Florence Pugh and Emily Blunt, who both of them are great in the movie. Emily Blunt's always great in the movie. It's hard to say that, Emily Blunt surprised me, but I felt like with both female characters, and I know that Christopher Nolan's gotten critiques about his portrayal of female characters, and after seeing Interstellar, I don't necessarily. I mean, it's hard because you have the Jessica Chastain character in that, and so it's hard to say that like he just can't write for women, but you see a movie like Tenet, and then you see this movie, and you start trying to pick apart, what are the differences between the male characters and female characters in the film, and then what does in this movie, what are the female characters supposed to represent to Oppenheimer? Because that's essentially like what the film is trying to do. It's trying to portray a human being who lived in this world and did something, and how the other people, how his interactions and his collisions with other people affected how he, how his life, what became of his life. So I think the fact that you kind of really hone in on those two female characters, and you don't really spend any time even with, there's a third female character, the wife of another one of the higher ups who they very deftly allude to. Well, they don't even definitely allude. They just pretty much come out and say like that he had an affair with her, but that really wasn't.
They say
even,
that.
Yeah, they just say it. So that really wasn't a part of the movie. It was just something that they dropped in there. So that's the part where like that's a choice. That's a Christopher Nolan choice. Why did Christopher Nolan make that choice? So what did you feel like from a character standpoint, the two female characters? Do you feel like they lacked anything? Or I felt like Florence Pugh wasn't on screen enough for her character to be as impactful as the person was to Oppenheimer. So that's what I felt. And it was a reduced character, even though Florence Pugh did a great job. And you could say, well, there's so much stuff in the movie, but the movie's also 3 hours long. So how can we service that portion, how can we service that part of the character, especially since, in my opinion, the reason why the movie is R-rated is because of the sexual side of Oppenheimer and how that manifests. Not only that's another element to that character, along with the just the bravado of the man himself and the taking on of the mantle of being the father of the atomic bomb, even though we can see in the movie there's a bunch of other people who were involved in it, and so that right there is kind of like we as a society need somebody at the top of the food chain. We as a society, it seems like we need somebody to be able to point at and say like, this is the person. So he took on that, and there's that kind of like, just, you need to be a certain type of person to be able to do that. You also need to be a certain type of person to steamroll your way through multiple women and just kind of just go at it. So anyway, that's a lot, and I just asked like a couple of questions, but.
Well, it's interesting because earlier on in the podcast, I said this movie is definitely worth seeing in the theaters first, and it's an encyclopedia of information. And I did not know the Russians split the atom first. I guess maybe in the back of my mind I've learned that, but I could not have divulged that information just by thinking of it, or somebody asked me. I don't know why I don't know that as a fact, but there are certain things that are happening in the beginning of the film that I was like, oh, okay, that's okay, yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Didn't know that. That's interesting. Why don't I know this? Oh, I must. So that was all interesting. But the reason why I went like this and then went like this is because those are the first two questions that I have. The first question is this. I don't know whether or not I'm not capable of understanding what makes a great screenplay a great screenplay. Now, when something sings to me and I actually get it, I don't think to myself, and I kept reminding myself about that during the Barbie film, yet another reference, that it's because of the great writing. It was on the page. It was on the page. She wrote a great film. But do I understand what makes an actual great screenplay great? Not really, not fully. I'm sure I would understand it maybe a little quicker than some people because I love film and I love theater and I've been involved and I've read a lot of stuff. But I don't know how to say this is what makes a great screenplay and this is why. But I will say this. I mentioned the little vignettes. There's a lot of little vignettes. I'm questioning, do they add up to what we need to know about this character that we're learning about? So I don't know whether or not the female characters are written well, whether or not Christopher Nolan doesn't write a female character well, because then there's Carrie-Anne Moss from Memento, and then there's Hilary Swank from Insomnia. Are those not written well? I don't know. You would have to explain. I'm not saying they are or aren't. I just don't know. So you would have to say, this is why they are, or this is why they aren't. And I could say, oh, yeah, okay, I see that. I see this. Oh, based on the film, I see this. My point to that is that I'm not sure I understand why we need to know any of that information about Florence Pugh. I don't know why does that affect what Oppenheimer does in the movie. Why do we need to know it? And I have two examples. Walk the Line, Joaquin Phoenix. The very opening sequence, or one of the very opening sequence, is with him and his brother. Do you remember that?
No.
Okay. Did you see the movie?
A long time ago.
Okay. Do you mind if I say what happens? That
Go
way?
for it, yeah.
Okay. His brother dies in a horrific accident. Okay. And from that point on, that event has affected Johnny all the way to the point that we know Johnny Cash is Johnny Cash, with his father, with his relationships, with how he is haunted by that, with his drug abuse. It all is connected back to that event. So that one event, that part of his history, which is a pretty traumatic, dramatic part, and makes good film or movie making, or it's conducive to good storytelling. Yeah. Yes, thank you. It's conducive to good storytelling, even though it's a tragedy, and I don't think you should play on tragedy, but it's what happened. Okay, I said 2 examples. I give you a third. I'll give you 3. What's love got to do with it? Why does she say to him, Tina Turner's movie, why does she say to him, I'll never leave you? I don't know if you remember it, but she says to Ike, I'll never leave you. And a lot of people are like, why would you stay? You know, the psychological disposition of an abused person. Why do they stay? Why do they, not just get up and walk away? Well, the reason why she stayed, at least from my perspective, was because of what happens in the beginning of the film where her mother leaves her. And I also read the book, so it's like a little easier to understand that. So in other words, that connects everything that she does to every reason why she does it for the rest of the film. Ray, why does he become a drug addict? Why does he sleep around? Why does he have affairs on women? I think it comes down to the event where he lost his sight when he was a child. And forever, that has influenced what has happened to him the rest of his life. And they even come back to it a couple of times. They even make references to it a couple of times. Your dog agrees with me. So are you getting where I'm going with this? So why are we, Florence Pugh acting, I'm good. Mm-hmm. But why do we need to know that she's such a tragic character? What does that have to do with what happens to her in the film? How does that affect what happens to him when he becomes the father of the nuclear bomb? What is it? Why is Emily Blunt, little vignettes, the mother who can't attach herself to her children, who's an alcoholic, blah, blah, blah. I'm not saying I'm criticizing Christopher Nolan for writing tragic characters and maybe all he can write is females that are tragic. I'm not saying that. And I don't know whether or not Emily Blunt's character is underwritten or not. What I don't understand is, why are we seeing those things in his life? Is it just because they're part of his bio? Is it just because they're part of his character building? But in a movie, for me at least, you have to have a reason why you interject something in the movie. Is it interesting that he's kind of, an introverted scientist who might not have the personality, who might hook up with all of these beautiful women? So he does anyway because he has some kind of sexual confidence, or he has some kind of confidence with women, or he exudes some kind of confidence that women like. I don't know. And I think at 3 hours, you need to have an answer for some of those questions. Did it haunt him later on in his life? And is he sitting up late at night and thinking about what he's supposed to do here, there, and everywhere with this bomb situation? And then something about that tragedy sparks something else, which leads him to something else, which leads him to the answer to what he's having a question about? Doesn't seem like that's there. Let me make one more point.
Yeah.
And why are we watching, and I'm not criticizing, I'm questioning. We're watching a movie about the father of the nuclear bomb, and yet why is he considered the father of the nuclear bomb? He should just be considered the father of that town. He didn't in the movie. What does he do that makes the bomb work other than be the manager of that town? He is put in charge of that town. And why though? Because when they find out that the Russians split the atom, they're like, no way. And then he does that mathematical thing on the chalkboard and he goes, oh yeah, they did. Yeah. Oh yeah. But if this, why not that? And that sparks this whole thing. Okay. So I need to know why they came to him. I need to know why he was considered the father of the nuclear bomb. I need to know why he was considered a leader and smart enough to control this whole situation. Why? And honestly, maybe in a second viewing, I'll get it. Yeah. But in the first, I didn't.
I think, yeah, I've seen it twice. And I think that all of those questions are, well, almost all those questions are answered. We'll start going backwards and see what I can remember. So why did they choose him instead of another person? They do address that. They knew that he had a communist background, and Matt Damon's character, I can't remember the general's name, felt like he could control Oppenheimer in a much easier way than he could control somebody else, because it's essentially like, we've got dirt on you, so you're going to be a little bit more pliable than another scientist of your same stature and all that. Also, I mean, he was a big name in quantum physics in the United States. I mean, they do bring that up too, and say that he essentially brought quantum physics to the United States because it was being done in Europe, and nobody really took it seriously. None of the American physicists took it seriously, so that's why he had to go to Europe, learn about it, and then bring it back. So I got that. Yeah, okay. All those things are why he was, picked to be the lead. Secondly, you do need a project manager, and it's just like the director of a film, and we haven't talked about this yet, but you can obviously see that Christopher Nolan reveres Oppenheimer, and maybe he has critiques of Oppenheimer too, but he reveres Oppenheimer so much that he spent millions and millions and millions of dollars and 3 hours of a movie focusing on him. And you can definitely tell a direct correlation between Oppenheimer's position as the lead at Los Alamos and on the Manhattan Project and the director of a movie. And all of the decisions, the myriad of decisions that need to be made every day, constantly, there was always something, oh, this guy doesn't want to do this, I can't work with this person, we need to focus on this, no, that guy's wrong, I'm right, here, I'll show you, here's my calculations, there's their calculations. There needs to be some sort of arbiter of, where are we going with this, what do we spend our time on? And that's exactly what a director does all day, every day, for months and months and months on end. So I think that's why you can say that he is the father of the atomic bomb, because ultimately there's a bunch of people underneath him, but it's a little bit different because, like, I guess you can simplify it and be like, oh, he was just in his basement and he came up with the atomic bomb. Well, no, he didn't. There's a bunch of other people that were associated with that. And I don't think Christopher Nolan shies away from that fact, but that's ultimately why he's called the father of the atomic bomb, is because he was the director of the project. So, and the scientist that was the director of the project. So if we go back another layer, why was Kitty not able to attach to her children? I mean, you could make a case that the character in the movie, I don't really know about the real person, but the real person was a botanist, was a scientist, and she rattles off all of these, husbands that she had before. I think the husband that she cheats with Oppenheimer is her third husband. Yeah. And so Oppenheimer is her fourth husband. Yeah. So she becomes a scientist as a young woman, and then basically gives all that up and becomes, a wife of all of these people and moves from one to the next. And one of her husbands gets killed fighting in Spain for the Spanish resistance as a communist. And so you have all of that backstory. And so I could see where she may feel like society at that time has not given her the ability to. See, this is the problem. I'm having to glean all this because there's not enough screen time and there's not enough character development for that character. I'm having to put all of that on her and be like, why can't she attach to her children? Why doesn't she want to, deal with her kid, even though she's been dealing with her kid all day and her husband's gone all the time? Because he's doing the stuff that she wants to do.
Right. I got all of that. But my question is, it's interesting how you ended what you were just saying. I had to glean all of that. And I don't have a problem with that. And I don't have an issue with it. What I need to know is why are we trying to figure all that out in an Oppenheimer film? Is it just because he wanted to give the other characters enriched backgrounds? What does that have to do with why Oppenheimer was able to do what he was able to do? What is it about her that she needs to be in his film, or vice versa?
Oh.
I got all of that too. I wasn't saying that I didn't it's not that I didn't understand why she was an alcoholic or why, and it's an often used trope, by the way. Not that it's not true. It's just like all these major men in all these films always have a drug addicted, drunk wife. It's just the way it is. Tombstone, all those films. Anyway, and that's the way that it is. It's factually probably true. I'm not criticizing that. I need to know why we need to know about the drunk wife. No disrespect, who didn't attach to her children, and why he wants her in his life, and why are we watching that about a film about the father of the atomic bomb? Why are we, what is connecting it for me to be, and what ended up happening was, I love Emily Blunt. I love her. I've got never a bad thing to say about her. I just will not, because she's exquisite and she's just on point every time. And she is wonderful in this movie. But I feel like I almost needed a part 2 with just her, and just why her in his life. Now, I'm not saying he's more important as a person, or as a man's more important than a woman. I'm not saying that. I don't want anybody to misinterpret what I just said there. And I certainly don't want any kind of subconscious thing working from whatever life I've had. It's spewing out stuff like that. That's not what I'm talking about. I need to know why his possession of this job that he was giving trumped all of the stuff that she was going through. He did not notice it, did not care. At one point, he kind of sees it and kind of says something to her about it. And she kind of starts to evolve, and then she's gone again, and then she's back again, and then she's doing this. And then he's having an affair with that blonde woman, which I was like, wait, why is that in here? I'm not sure what's going on. So it's not that I didn't understand or had to glean something from Emily Blunt, because I got all of that. And that's because of Emily Blunt and what she pulled from the script and what she brought to the script. And I'm sure that's all her inner monologue as an actress and so forth. But my bottom line is, what does that have to do? The movie's called Oppenheimer. So what does that have to do while we're watching an Oppenheimer film? Why do I need to know that? And I'm not sure it's in the film.
Well, I don't know. There is that scene when she's crying, when the baby's crying, and he ends up taking the baby to Chevalier and his wife, and he says, "We are horrible people." Like, he says that, and they end up like giving their baby to the Chevaliers, and for a little while he's like for a while, and then they end up going to New Mexico and riding around, and that's when they kind of that's when Emily Blunt pushes for him to take on to like go all in on this project. And so that's kind of both of them being like, that was their main focus, and he couldn't cloud his life with having to deal with a kid or whatever. And so
it doesn't come across like that. It came across like he didn't want the child to be mistreated by the mother who couldn't handle it. That's what it came across to me as. I wish it had been, well, maybe it's there and I didn't see it.
Well, but he also doesn't say she's a horrible mother. He says,
no, of course
we
not.
are horrible people.
Right. Absolutely.
Like, meaning that like he doesn't want to have to deal with it either. You know what I mean? Like, he could have just said no. He could have just said no to the Manhattan Project and be like, I need to focus on my family and my wife and make sure that all of this is fine. But instead he was like, nope, this is much more important, so I'm going to go do this for whatever reason. So there you go. So that is a character moment for that character. And so that's one way to do it. And it's a fairly efficient way to do it.
Absolutely. No doubt. But I just, okay.
Lastly, I think the reason why they kept the Jean Tatlock character in there, the Florence Pugh's character, is also to really drive home the fact that he was consorting with communists, with people who were heavily involved in the Communist Party. So I mean, they have multiple scenes of that, even though he wasn't in this portrayal of the movie of the person. as the character, he wasn't, a card-carrying member of the Communist Party. He still had very tight ties with people, and at very important inflection points in the development of the Manhattan Project, and that's what the Jason Clarke character brings up, and all that whole Gene Tatlock thing is, you were alone with this person and we have no idea what you said to her, and so that was their whole big thing. So I think that's one big reason why the character's in there, and also just the hubris of saying like, the probably best thing to do would be to not stay involved with this person, but I'm just gonna do it because that's just me, man. Like that's that he couldn't say no because he didn't want to say no. And also, Pugh.
And then you see her sitting in that chair and you go, well, this is why he couldn't say no. I mean, that's pretty obvious. It's not gratuitous at all. It's like, look at her. Yeah. I love that. Of course, they're stripped down literally, and that they're showing each other who they are as human beings. I get that. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that makes sense. I mean, can you understand though that?
Yeah, no, I have problems with it too. Like I said, I feel like those characters are underserved considering the breadth of the movie and the amount of time we spend on other elements of the storytelling. And if they are as important as I think they are in the development of the Oppenheimer character, there should be a little bit more tendons connecting them to his life. So that was the main thing that I had. So, all right, Robert Downey Jr., did you like?
Yeah, I was like sitting there thinking, why is it taking so long? But it's good that we gave other people. Yes, I think he's going to be nominated for Best Supporting Actor. I think he'll be a front runner. I think Ken has he has a lot of competition from Ken. I feel the Kenergy from Ryan Gosling. So yes, he's superb. There's not a scene. I mean, he's really good in this, and you understand everything he's thinking, every reason why he's doing everything. I just don't understand some of the reasonings. I'm not saying I don't understand what he was choosing and why he chose it. I don't understand. That's the motivating factor. On a first viewing, after 3 hours, that sounds like I'm mad about it. I don't mind long films. Drive My Car, subtitled Drive My Car, and which I cannot wait to see again. And it's on a list of have to see again. But I spent time watching Everything Everywhere All at Once 2 times in a row. So good. It's so good. It's so well done. Anyway, Robert Downey Jr., when he says, so do I have the votes? And the first time he says it, he's saying, I have the votes. And then when he finds out he doesn't have the votes, he sort of says something very similar the second time, but he questions why so I don't have the votes. It's a very interesting line read that he does, because it's very similar, but it's 2 sides of that coin, obviously, because he's in denial the second time that he doesn't have the votes and he's not going to get what he wants. He's not going to get this seat. So all of that makes sense to me, and he made it make sense to me. And when he's on screen, the movie pops, absolutely pops. I just don't understand his motivation for why he was so against Oppenheimer. Was it because
he's just petty? I mean, it's
right,
2 big guys coming against each other and saying, no, I'm bigger than you are.
You don't even want to know what I call that. It's not appropriate for this podcast. I think you've heard me say that phrase before. I call it the locker room syndrome. We'll leave it at that. Yes. Okay. Then that's good. I am not perplexed by that's what Christopher Nolan decided to put in the film. I'm perplexed by grown men having motivation like that. I'm not questioning why we're seeing that in the film. I'm questioning why a human being would have that much pettiness. So what you're saying is, in the film, Robert Downey Jr.'s character, which I'm a little afraid to pronounce the name because the way yeah, but the way he says it and the way everybody else says it sounds exactly the same to me. So it's like, what?
Well, I think
Okay.
people are leaning into Strauss, but he wanted to downplay the fact
Strauss.
that he's Jewish.
Right. Okay. Yeah, got that. So by the end of the film, it's not that he's a communist. It's not that he bags on the atomic bomb after creating the atomic bomb. It's not that Oppenheimer is like, yeah, we shouldn't use these nuclear warheads. It's not that, although that's what he takes to Congress to say is a bad thing. But yet it's all because he didn't know what Albert Einstein said to him secretly. So now he's mad that he didn't hear the conversation with the smartest man on earth. I mean, that's really petty. And first of all, that's Tom Conti playing Albert Einstein, and I love that actor. I don't know.
Okay.
You know who he is. You've seen him a million times.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
you've seen him. You've seen him. You know. Did you see the film? We'll talk about that some other time. But yeah, when you look at his bio, you'll be like, oh, I love this guy. Well, I do. And he was perfect. He was Albert Einstein. And I have this thing about there are certain characters that are recreated over and over again of real life people. Andy Warhol, and Bowie's played Andy Warhol to perfection. But so many people have played that character, and it's almost like you can kind of get away with it because of the look. It's kind of the same thing with Albert Einstein. But I didn't for a split second not believe that that was Albert Einstein. Even though I knew who the actor was and I could recognize the actor, I believed it. And you're waiting this whole entire film to find out what he did say. And what he did say was not about him and insignificant on some levels. And like all of this is generated by pettiness. Although Robert Downey Jr.'s character, he gets the film takes its revenge out on him. It gets the final say in what happens in his life, even though he put Oppenheimer through all of this stuff. See, now all of this makes sense to me. All of this adds up to why I'm watching this in this film about these characters and why. Because if Oppenheimer had not been given the opportunity because his communistic background or whatever you want, however you want to define that,
communist sympathizing, yeah.
Right. Because at one point he doesn't necessarily believe it, but he trusts his brother and he understands why they have the certain views that they have, and he understands. It sounded more to me that he wasn't committing to any kind of political view, not necessarily agreed or disagreed with the communist point of view. He just didn't take a point of view. He just didn't take a political point of view. So it's not like he agreed or disagreed. He just wasn't going to, it doesn't matter what it was. He wasn't going to take it.
It sounded like he was interested in the communist theory, in the theory of communism, but the practicality of communism he wasn't on board with.
Right, which a lot of people talk about.
Yeah.
We just hear communist in our head, and you know, it spawns a whole bunch of different ideas, good, bad, or indifferent. So all of that made sense. So the only issue or the only question I have is, we spent 3 hours finding out that petty decision is the motivation for all of that black and white stuff. And I was like, that we took that amount of time to find that out. It was a bit anticlimactic and a bit disappointing. And maybe it's disappointing because I'm disappointed in human nature that we're petty like that. But somebody was talking to me about it, and I said, just out of nowhere, and I'm not trying to recreate or redirect or trying to make some people are calling a masterpiece better. For me, I'm trying to understand it so I know why I'm watching this story. It almost seemed to be that if they had revealed that in the beginning of the film and then backtracked to how we got there, that would have made more sense to me as an audience member watching it. But you go this whole entire time and you get to that point, you're like, that's the reason why he's got a problem with this guy? Really? I mean, you know, in the beginning of the film when he whispers in his ear, and you know Robert Downey Jr., and it's very well shot because then you see it again from different points of view, and Robert Downey Jr. is walking down. And the first time you see it from his point of view, and then you see it from Oppenheimer and Albert Einstein. You see Robert Downey Jr. in the back, and he's walking at the same pace and distance as you see in the beginning of the film. Mm-hmm. It's something about it just struck me as very odd that this is the whole reason why this one man's motivation is his motivation. And like I said, I'm not saying it's because the film didn't clarify that. It might be because I'm disappointed in human nature. But overall, I was like, wow, he put him through all of that, tried to destroy this man's life, or basically destroyed this man's life. Now, this man, I don't know what historians feel about Oppenheimer. I've heard both sides. I've heard we're glorifying a bad man. We've not given a person who was just doing a job enough time to, we haven't understood him as a person. I've heard a bunch of different things over my lifetime. And I think the film does a great job at questioning those things and posing questions for you to answer yourself as audience members. But I still am like, wow, that's why this guy put him through all of this. That's why this guy created a fictitious council of men to question him. That's why he did all of this stuff, made this guy feel like he was going to go to jail, made Oppenheimer feel like less of a person. I mean, this is why. Because I didn't get to talk to Albert Einstein. I mean, come on. It's like, geez, Louise.
Well, yeah, they definitely boil it down, but I think that ultimately that's, yeah, I mean, it's about being petty, but there's a lot of stuff that, you know, he changed Oppenheimer's life because of, you know, the slights that Oppenheimer gave to him throughout their relationship together. But it's also a good kind of reflection of you know, some of the choices that Oppenheimer made in his life too, and about how he was very aware of his reputation in the scientific community, and that was the most important thing to him, which is why Strauss knew to attack that. He knew that to go after that because that was the most important thing to Oppenheimer. And then Oppenheimer being able to leverage his title, you know, that was given to him as the father of the atomic bomb to try to push, you know, the federal regulations and federal, you know, the country's, whether it's, you know, you developing the hydrogen bomb and all those things, trying to push those things and be a big mover and shaker in that atomic energy committee and all that stuff like that. Those were the most important things to him, and how he moved forward. So I think that you've just got two guys that are very self-important that are going at it, and there's just no room for there to you know, there's not enough air in the room for both of them. And so, yeah.
And thus an interesting movie is made.
Yeah.
That to me is an interesting movie. So I hesitate to say what I'm going to say next, but it is a thought I've had and I have been thinking about it. And I mean, no disrespect to anybody who made this film. And I hesitate to say it because who the hell am I? I mean, I'm just a guy who watches movies, right? But for me, that right there is the movie, and you could take an hour out of this film and make that movie about that, and I would have been lit. I would have been like, best picture, best director, everything. I'm not saying that's not going to happen and it won't deserve those accolades or those the conversation of those accolades. I'm saying that everything we just talked about matches what we were talking about earlier. A reason why, a motivation, an understanding of why something in Oppenheimer's past influenced what he did in the future, a decision one man made, and the idea that Robert Downey Jr.'s character is this character, and he made these choices which affect Oppenheimer later on in the film because of the committee and all that other stuff. It all makes sense on some kind of level. And so when I see it a second time, I'm hoping that those dotted lines are connected this time, because everything we just talked about with these two characters at the end of the podcast makes sense to me. It rang interesting to me. It sang for me. And I thought to myself, if you take that storyline, which is infinitely interesting because of the whole idea of men being so freaking petty towards each other and their egos being too big to be in the locker room together, and you put all that artsy stuff he has in the beginning of the film together, woo, I'm in.
Yeah, I mean the visual effects. I mean, I've got to say, like 2 seconds about the
Stunning.
visual effects, and the fact that he's very adamant. Christopher Nolan's very adamant about like they didn't use any CGI to touch up anything. They were doing composite shots where it's not like everything was caught in camera at the exact time that you see it in frame, but they generated all of those things practically, whether they used miniatures, the whole atomic bomb explosion, and all of that was done practically, and all of the little things flying around in his head around him in the beginning of the film, and all that stuff's done practically, or with minimal modifications. It's visual effects as opposed to CGI. So that right there, it's a level of craft that you don't see as much anymore. But yeah, so
Well,
that used to be the only way to do it back in Stanley Kubrick's time in 2001, and now he's choosing to do that because in a lot of ways it's not going to age in the same way that CGI ages now. So if you look at Armageddon, and the that kind of stuff, the asteroid breaks up and it looks horrible, looks really bad. But
it's starting to happen to the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
But I mean, he took a tough subject and he made a complex film, and he gets his point across, and it's visually stunning, and all of those things that you just talked about must have been challenges, and his mind has a way of working through all of that stuff. I mean, it works on so many levels, and he should be celebrated because it is the most complex film out there right now, if you want to look at it like that.
Yeah.
I mean, there are different levels of what makes something complex. The subject matter alone makes it more complex than a lot of things out there now. Doesn't make it more important, doesn't make it more interesting. It doesn't make it more complex than how, I'm going to make a Barbie reference again, it doesn't make it any more complex than it would be to do the production design on bringing doll parts to life, bringing a doll and all of her parts to life, her houses and all that stuff. That's still complex and still difficult to do. It's just the weight of the subject seems different, obviously. So he should be celebrated. It's a marvel he even got what he got, and it's amazing that it's on film the way that it is. So if he is celebrated at Oscar time, I'll be fully behind it.
Yeah.
There's just a piece of my heart that's not fully there, meaning my heart was not in it. And that's me. Second time, I might be completely blown away, and I'm trying to justify saying anything bad about Christopher Nolan.
It's definitely worth the second watch. I mean, I saw so much more the second time, and I was able to really focus in on some of the things that either I didn't understand narratively that really showed off a lot better the second time, and then also able to think a little bit more about the character arcs, because it's hard for me the first time through a movie to really dig into character arcs, because that's not the stuff that I'm looking at. I'm looking at visual effects. I'm looking at shot selection. I'm looking at the pace of a shot, the pace of a scene. I'm looking at that kind of stuff, and not necessarily, the exact words that somebody's saying. So anyway, all right. Are you good?
I'm good.
All right, sweet. You can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer, and you can find us on YouTube. Just search for the Actor and the Engineer podcast, and we'll see you next time.